Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Good Healer channel on YouTube. Tonight, we are going to start looking at building an idea of what a good healer or practitioner actually looks like. So, this is going to be the first episode of technically, it's a 4-part series. This is kind of the introduction, and then we'll get into part 1 of that series next time. This is the introduction to investigative medicine and the introduction to the investigative medicine 4-part series. So, through this episode and the following 4, we are going to start piecing together some foundations of the qualities and characteristics that make someone good at a healing profession. Then from there, practical applications include ways that we can change the way we educate providers or change the way that we look for providers as patients, get an idea of what we should be valuing. So there's some ethical considerations and arguments here, but also about real, tangible ways that we can shift practice. So, the argument that I will be making and introducing to you tonight, and then continuing over our next several sessions together, is that the power of investigation is at the core of the medical profession. We're going to talk in later episodes about building on that idea of investigation, and what it takes to bring that investigation from A to B to C to D. But the argument will remain the same, that at the end of the day, the investigative spirit is what drives not just medical knowledge, medical research, but drives the efficacy of the patient-provider experience and within the confines of a patient visit. So why is that? First, I want to spend some time talking to you about why human beings ask questions. So throughout human history, for the 300,000 years that human beings have been around, we have been using our brains as they have evolved to ask questions about what is around us, what we see, what we experience, what we feel, and all of the different ways that we can observe things happening around us. This is one of the things that makes human beings. Our ability to question, to learn about the world around us in a meaningful way, and then attach meaning to those experiences and to that knowledge. This passion and thirst for inquiry that has been with us since the beginning of our species and has only sped up over time is responsible for most everything that we value in medicine, and not just medicine, but anything that takes asking questions, being curious, posing doubts, all of these things, whether it's a mechanic looking at something that's wrong with a car, or a little kid asking why the sky is blue, or a researcher in a lab, or a doctor who is encountering a patient complaint for the first time. These all require us to use investigative parts of our brain. And I want to break that down because I'm not only sitting here arguing, of course, that human beings like to ask questions, but that is the driver of medical efficacy and a positive patient-provider experience. And that, of course, it should be emphasized more when patients look for a good doctor or a good practitioner. And it should be emphasized more on the training level when it comes to how we are educating our providers. So my My first thing that I want to say about the importance of investigation in medicine and the healing traditions is what it means to be curious about something. And this is something that we take for granted because most of us are curious by nature. It's part of our humanity, as I said. But when it comes to medicine and when it comes to the human body and treating patients and being in an encounter with a patient that's experiencing a symptom, we can't get to the investigation part without the curiosity part. Being curious about something, when you are curious about something, two things happens there. First, you get that desire to learn, that desire to know, that kind of passion for wanting to know the answer to something that is an integral part of our cerebral experience as human beings. And we've all felt that, right? It doesn't matter what it's about. It could be about GI Joes. It could be about medicine. It could be about submarines. We all have our passions, right? The things that we are passionate about. That is really fueled by that curiosity and that desire to know and understand and discover. So this isn't a foreign concept to any of us. But when we see it applied in medicine, that curiosity habit, as I like to call it, those are the providers that when they come in contact with a patient who's experiencing something, they light up. They light up at the opportunity of learning, of discovering, of experiencing, and of knowing. There's a treasure hunting, truth seeking part of that provider brain that says, oh, this is a challenge. This is something new. This is something curious. And it lights them up, right? We're going to talk more about that in subsequent episodes, episodes 1 through 4 that I mentioned. We're going to talk more about that curiosity and that light up, and how valuable that is in questions about provider efficacy and, what it means to be a good healer. So we're going to come back to that. Right now, I'm just introducing the concept to give you an idea of why I think investigative medicine is so crucial. So first is that curiosity-driven drive, right? That ambition to know that comes from a curiosity spark, that it would be my hope that medical providers have. Hopefully, that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. The other thing, though, that I think is really important to say now in this introductory section, because I'm going to keep bringing up this theme every time we talk about it from here on out. There is a vulnerability in being curious. Being curious means admitting that you don't know. You don't know now. Otherwise, it wouldn't be that interesting, and it wouldn't ignite that little spark that we all have in our human brains when we get curious about something. I live with a 3.5-year-old, so I know what curiosity looks like. Her ability to constantly ask questions every 5 seconds about absolutely everything, while tries my patience sometimes, it's a real testament to her ability to be humble about what she doesn't know. She doesn't feel shame or embarrassment about asking me questions. She knows she doesn't know anything. She just wants to know. Um, and there's an admirable quality to that. It takes some humility, especially as we get older and become adults. It takes some humility and some vulnerability to be like, hey, I don't know this. I don't know about this. But wouldn't it be exciting to find out? I think we lose some of that as we get older, as we are expected to know more, and we lose some of that curiosity spark. Being in the medical profession or any kind of investigative profession gives us an opportunity as adults to play in that way, the way we did when we were kids, asking our moms and dads 1,000 questions. Now we get to play at that all over again. And if we're fortunate enough to be in medicine, or a healing tradition, we get to do it in a way that can really positively impact people's lives. But we have to be able to be humble enough to take the risk of being curious, of putting ourselves out there and saying, I don't know, but this is really making me curious. I would really love to learn this. This sounds really cool, really interesting. Um, I can't imagine living a life that's not curious. I know people who are uncurious. I know non-curious providers and non-curious kids and non-curious grown-ups. And it seems like an overwhelmingly boring existence to me because there's no drive to learn anything new, to excel, to be challenged. Um, and there is, I think we all know people where there's a lot of pride and ego involved in that, where it's safer to not talk about what we don't know. And that asking questions feels scary because it admits that we don't have the answer to something. So I'm not a therapist, and my job in this series is not to therapize every provider or health practitioner out there. But I think that this particular profession lends itself better to curious people, and that curious people are able to take that first investigative step and we're going to talk about those steps as we move forward here. But there is a vulnerability in asking questions. There's a vulnerability in putting your hand up and saying, I don't know the answer. Or can you repeat that? Or I'm not sure what's happening here. Those are really vulnerable. Those are vulnerable actions to take. So admirable in medicine, though, because as we all know, research, the ultimate fuck around and find out, right? That is full of people who don't know the answer. And their whole gig is trying to find the answer. But they start off by saying, oh, we don't know. I love that. There's no better opportunity for learning than admitting ignorance. There is a beauty in being able to say, you don't know. It's tough in medicine because we're expected to know. Patients look at us like we are the be all end all of everything. However, this is also not true. Another thing that we are going to talk about going forward here is that human beings have finite brains. We're not supposed to know everything. We're not supposed to have all of the answers. We've been trying to understand the human body for 300,000 years and we still don't. We are still just breaking the tip of the iceberg of what we know about how the body works, which is all the more reason to maintain some humility in the face of trying to figure it out. It is a foundational argument for other basic things like being a teammate with your patient and believing patients when they tell you things, because we are not experts on the human body. And we're definitely not experts on other people's experience of having a human body. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we go through this investigative medicine series and we start to put together a list of characteristics that we look for in a provider and that we want to be as providers and that we want to teach providers to be. And that brings me to the tip for this class, this episode, which is good healers are truth seeking. Good healers seek out answers, and in doing that, they arrive to answers, and they are the right answers. And then patients get better. But in order to be truth seeking, they maintain humility, they maintain vulnerability, and they know that their brains do not have the answers to everything, and that they are humble servants along this path of investigative inquiry, and that they do that alongside a patient. That was a big mouthful. And it's the whole hope of mine over this episode and the next four to drive that point home and to break it down a little bit so that we can continue working through that model. I'm going to end there today, guys. Remember, this is just an introduction. I'm going to be back hopefully soon to discuss the first step in the investigative process. Together, all four of them called them the 4 Gs. I like nothing if not some really good alliteration, so expect that a lot. But when you come back to see me for the next episode, we are going to talk about the first G, which is gather, and the way that we gather information, and the way that doing that and the way we go about doing that sets the platform for that truth-seeking behavior, that investigative inquiry, and that curious mind at work. Okay, guys, I hope you have a good evening. Thanks for joining me again. Take care.